With an extraordinary career spanning almost 7 decades, Sir Christopher Lee lived quite a life. Today we farewell one of Britain's and the world's greatest actors. From Dracula to Bond villain to Middle-earth. Thanks for joining The Briefcase. Christopher Lee is truly an inspiration. I say is an inspiration because of the superb legacy he leaves behind. A series of unmatchable on-screen performances and a dizzying resume of films. I'm not even kidding, it made me dizzy scrolling through his IMDb account. Lee featured in more than 200 films. Not bad for a guy who was once told he was too tall to be an actor and too old to play Gandalf.
Get up. Come on, get up.
Anyway, we've whittled that list down to 5 classics, starting with The Coast of Frankenstein, a film that not only established Hammer as the UK's top horror studio, but launched the career of Mr. Lee within a genre that boosted his career immeasurably. Unlike the powerful and menacing portrayals he is known for, Frankenstein's monster is a tragic and confused character, and Lee pulls it off in spectacular fashion. It was in fact Lee's stature that scored him the role in the 1957 film. Looking for someone big, the producers asked 2 actors what their minimum fee would be, and Lee won out with £8 a day compared with Bernard Breslau's 10. There were sequels to the film based on Mary Shelley's novel, but none were ever as good as the original. This is the film that first introduced Lee to Peter Cushing, whom he would work alongside in many films to come. A role younger generations would be more familiar with comes in at number 4, Saruman the White. First introduced in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Christopher Lee reprised his role for the final 2 installments of the Hobbit franchise. The last film, The Battle of the Five Armies, saw him kicking butt in a Shaolin kung fu fight scene, which he performed at the age of 92. Apparently he belongs to 3 stuntman unions. Lee was one of those guys you could never guess the age of, and you think he will live forever. Claiming to read Tolkien's trilogy every year, it had been a decade-long dream to play Gandalf. But when the films were given the green light, he was deemed too old. Far out, too old for Gandalf? That's a rough call. And just to add fuel to the fire, he was the only Lord of the Rings actor to have met J.R.R. Tolkien, who passed away in 1973. In fact, his knowledge was so extensive, Peter Jackson often referred to Lee for advice.
A new power is rising. Its victory is at hand.
Dracula, the terrifying, the feared.
Stepping into a role previously belonging to Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee redefined the character Count Dracula. He brought a mix of imposing physicality, intelligence and charisma to the role, sexualizing vampires for the first time. The 1958 film Horror of Dracula was the first of 8 Dracula films Lee was to star in, making him a household name. Just a year after Frankenstein, he was reunited with Peter Cushing, both in their conflicting roles. However, Lee maintains he was blackmailed into sticking around for the sequels. Upon refusing the roles, Jimmy Carreras, president of Hammer Films, would say, "Well, I've already sold it to a distributor with you in the part," and tell Lee to think of all the people and friends he would put out of work. Lee's Dracula was regal, dark and animalistic. Even with minimal dialogue, Lee's physical performance terrified audiences and further laid down the template for modern interpretations of Count Dracula.
I could have shot you down when you landed, but that would have been ridiculously easy.
Close to the top, Sir Christopher Lee's second best performance would have to be as the great Bond villain Scaramanga. Appearing in his first and only James Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun, opposite Roger Moore, Lee's performance was subdued yet menacing, an expert in evil. Ian Fleming, author of the James Bond spy novel and also Lee's step-cousin, had offered him the antagonist role for Dr. No, but the producers had already chosen Joseph Wiseman. So finally, when the deadly assassin Scaramanga came along in '74, Lee jumped at the opportunity. He said that in Fleming's novel the character is just a West Indian thug, but in the film he's charming, elegant, amusing and lethal. He said he played him like the dark side of Bond, a very wise decision that critics claim held the film together.
My golden gun against your Walther PPK. Each of us with a 50-50 chance.
6 bullets to your 1.
I only need 1.
It's most important that each new generation born on Summer Isle be made aware that here the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true God, to whose glory churches and monasteries have been built on these islands for generations past? Now, sir, what of him?
Well, he's dead. He can't complain. He had his chance, and in modern parlance, blew it.
The year before his Bond role, Sir Christopher Frank Carradine Lee took on what is regarded by many as his best film, The Wicker Man. Not only a brilliant performance by the legendary actor, but one of the greatest films ever made. A police sergeant is sent to a Scottish island village in search of a missing girl whom the townsfolk claim never existed. The pagan madness that takes place leaves the deeply religious sergeant, played by Edward Woodward, trapped in a whirlpool of mystery. Lee is at his sinister best as the charming, fiercely traditional Lord Summerisle, the leader of the playful but very scary nature-worshipping cult. The interplay between Lee's carefree Summerisle and the overbearingly devout Sergeant Howie leads to some brilliantly tense scenes in a film that blends mystery, musical and horror. It's a film you can never unsee, with one of the most terrifying endings in all of cinema. The old gods aren't dead indeed. All over the world, tributes are pouring in, demonstrating the magnitude of Christopher Lee's talent, humility and impact on those he met. As Peter Jackson described him, a man of the world. He spoke 7 languages, who was well versed in art, politics, literature, history and science. He was a scholar, singer and a marvellous actor. The briefcase farewells an icon of cinema as he passes into legend.